Mr. Sharma, for the introduction, and thanks to the organizers for inviting First Solar. First Solar is one of the top 10 solar photovoltaic manufacturers worldwide. We're part of the Solar Module Super League, and we're perhaps differentiated from the rest of the companies because A, we are the only company which is headquartered in the Western Hemisphere. We are an American company. B, we also, our supply chain is completely independent of silicon. And, given the push around Atmanirbhar Bharat and creating, alternative supply chains in India for supporting the massive build out of solar, First Solar's made a commitment to invest close to $700 billion in a fully integrated 3.3 gigawatt per annum production line, which is coming up near Chennai. The plant would be operational in the fourth quarter of 2023. And we do hope to support the needs of the Indian market, especially around utility scale solar with our thin film product. Now, the organizers had asked us to talk about sustainable recyclable solar, and I think it's very topical in the context of net zero, that while the transition is already happening where we are displacing fossil fuels with renewable energy on the grid, there also needs to be a scrutiny around how clean or how dirty is your solar and wind. What's the input carbon going into the manufacturing of these equipments? How much it is, what's the water footprint? And how is the recycle reuse concept as these products would reach eventually an end of life at some point in time? And so with that, what I've done is put together a very brief presentation, which highlights some of the concepts which First Solar has adopted, and maybe spend another 2 to 3 minutes talking about certain policy initiatives which could be deliberated in this group as India looks at 450 gigawatts of renewables over the next decade. Let me just share my screen. So First Solar's, in terms of the context, the technology itself, as I said, is completely independent of the silicon supply chain. We use semiconductor materials which are produced as byproduct from copper and zinc smelting, which is basically cadmium and tellurium. And we take them and we make cadmium telluride as a binary compound, which is our core semiconductor. We then use it in a very resource efficient manufacturing process, which has got energy and water intensity significantly lower than the silica to module manufacturing process for the crystalline silicon value chain. And then over 30 years of deployment in the field, we definitely displace grid emissions, which is an obvious thing. But at the end of the day, we do have high value recycling services, which we provide to our customers for recycling the modules which reach end of life. Essentially, the technology is glass on glass, so there is no plastics and stuff like that which is used. And so we recover the glass, we recover the semiconductor, and we reuse the semiconductor to make new modules. And essentially, our recycling rates for photovoltaic industry are at about 90%, which, if you compare and contrast with the IT industry, is more than double. And it's significantly higher than the automotive industry. So essentially, the company has been following a path of circularization of the economy and circularization of the supply chain as its core operating principle since the company was formed. So in terms of the integrated life cycle approach, we take a fully integrated approach around this. So starts from sourcing of material, gets into the design of the product, which is designed for high value recycling. The manufacturing process is relatively simple. As I said, it's less energy, water, and emissions, in terms of the emission intensity. And then the product, especially if it is deployed between the tropics, does produce a higher amount of energy for the same installed capacity, thereby, displacing a higher amount of CO2 for the capacity installed in the field. And at the end of the day, we kind of recycle and reuse most of the material which goes into manufacturing the new product. So what we have is a high-value recycling facility, which is integrated with all our new and existing production facilities. So as we set up the manufacturing unit in Chennai, First Solar is going to invest in creating a high-value recycling facility, which will be the first of its kind in India, which will recycle at the end of the life our product. Also, what happens is that as you go into integrated manufacturing of solar modules, there is a lot of wastage and breakage which happens during production, because at the end of the day, it's glass. Glass does break, and if there is cracks or breakages in the glass, then you cannot use that product from an interim stage. So we use the recycling facility not just for recycling of field end-of-life modules which have reached the user end of usable life in the field, but the same facility and the same infrastructure is also used during the production process for recycling and recovering materials which otherwise would have been wasted. The process of recycling is pretty simple. We take solar panels, they basically are shredded and then put into a hammer mill and crushed. And then once the waste is crushed, then it goes through a chemical treatment process where the semiconductor is separated from the glass, and then the unrefined semiconductor is taken back to our the companies who provide us the new material, and they reuse and the recycled semiconductor and give us the new material which we use for making new panels. The glass is made into glass cullet, which eventually finds its way into glass products. The adhesives and some of the other materials are used basically to make rubber products. So in the end, the whole process gets us to about 90% plus in terms of the overall recycling capacity for the module, which is really a high value recycling, which we do globally, and we're going to do very soon in India for our technology. The other aspect of end of life recycling of solar panels, which is up for debate right now, is who pays for it. There are various models available. There is a model where the recycling fee is collected at the time the module is sold, and then it is managed through a trust, and then the fee is disbursed to recyclers on an actual basis, depending on the amount of product which is to be recycled every year. The other option is a pay-as-you-go model, which incidentally First Solar also follows, where the customer does not pay anything upfront, but as and when there is a need for recycling and disposing of the modules which have reached the end of life in the field, the customer contracts a recycler and pays for the service. Now, both of these two models have their own pros and cons. We can get into that at a later time during this call or subsequently. But the question which one needs to address, especially as we look at the Indian market, is who pays for it and how is the fee collected, to come up with an efficient policy around end of life recycling of solar modules. The other aspect of sustainable and recyclable solar panels, is really around the concept called EPEAT, which is basically electronic product environmental assessment tool. This is a globally recognized independent tool which is used by a lot of the electronic, semiconductor, consumer goods industry. Basically, it sets a framework around which manufacturers would provide data through which an assessment is done on the overall sustainability of the product. And we're proud to mention that First Solar is the first company, the first photovoltaic company, which got its products included in the EPEAT registry for sustainable electronics. We've got a silver-rated eco label, which we proudly display in our modules, and as our customers who are very conscious about the sustainability of their supply chain, this provides an additional incentive for customers as they look at their own ESG metrics, as they develop their renewable asset portfolio. I would not get into the details of what all goes into the EPEAT rating, but it covers a whole gamut of activities, starting from life cycle assessment of the technology, how efficient it is from an energy and water standpoint, how does the end of life recycling happen for the technology, what kind of packaging is used, are we talking about recyclable packaging or reusable packaging, and last but not the least is what kind of corporate responsibility and human rights practices are followed by the manufacturers. And this is extremely topical right now because we've seen evidences of forced labor being used by the crystalline silicon industry, especially the ones who are located in China, and which has caused a significant reaction globally around use of those products. For solar, as a corporate, does report on an annual basis its overall sustainability metrics. We are obligated under EPEAT to report the data around how much materials we've recycled, how much we've collected. So this is part of our global sustainability reporting, just as a sample of what a responsible OEM does in terms of meeting some of these objectives. I'll get into a couple of very quick points around the policy aspects of end of life and recycling and circular economy. These are words which are being used interchangeably in India, and there are, as we speak, several initiatives by various facets of the government looking at to frame an effective policy around the end of life and the circularity of the supply chain and the end of life disposal of solar waste. In this context, I think what we could do is, as a country, look at what has worked and adapt from it instead of trying to reinvent the wheel. Europe and the European Union is perhaps the most evolved market in terms of defining standards for recycling of photovoltaic waste in the world. There are European standards which are available, which are in practice, and these standards set the health and safety environmental management requirements for recyclers. It sets depollution and reporting obligations for the recycled material. It sets norms under what circumstances will the collection, logistics happen for end-of-life waste, and the whole gamut of the end of life to the recycling. So these are standards which have evolved over a lot of stakeholder deliberations, which happened in the EU in the last 5 to 7 years. One of our recommendations would be to start from here and then look at adapting some of these standards for deployment potentially in India as we look at circularity of our supply chain. The other aspect which we would like to table for deliberations in this panel or later is really to look at a separate PV end-of-life recycling or waste policy, which is segregated from the current e-waste management rules. And the reason is very simple. The e-waste management rules basically are designed for appliances which consume electricity as opposed to generating electricity. The e-waste management rules basically apply to more of commercial consumer type of items, as opposed to industrial items which are installed by experienced, sophisticated EPC companies and which have a life of 25 to 30 years. So really lumping this, PV policy as part of a broader e-waste management is not something which is desired. There have been experiments around this in other geographies, and independent regulations which are managed by an independent authority, which eventually rolls into the stakeholders who are responsible for the renewable energy, is something which is desired, as opposed to including PV end of life policies under e-waste management. But just to give a sense of what are we talking about? As you look at today, we have about 42 to 48 gigawatts of operating solar assets. Given the target of the government, there is going to be a significant amount of end-of-life waste which will be generated, and therefore the need of the hour right now is to start talking and discussing about what kind of policies and regulations one needs to adopt for this topic. With that, I would end my session and await questions. Back to you, Mr. Sharma.